Hey friends, welcome back to the shop. So this is going to be, I would say, a quick and unexpected update to the last episode that Dana and I did for our Big 3, Big 4 upgrade on our 2012 5th Gen Toyota 4Runner. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first is I'm going to make a change to it. Yes, you heard that right. I'm going to actually make a change. The second reason for this episode is to actually explain why I'm making that. Because for those that are actually coming to look at this particular episode or the one prior, there may be questions as to why I did this, why I did that, why I did not do something else. So I figured let me get ahead of that and try to explain some of that. If you've worked on projects with your cars, you've set out kind of a project plan, you know just as well as we do that sometimes during that project as you're working on it, things change, you don't like it, or the direction actually changes and you need to make a modification to that project plan. I love the way this turned out initially, but after getting it in and thinking about the forward step that I was planning on making, I've actually decided to not do that right now. And what that forward thinking step was going to be to upgrade the alternator on this. I don't think I really need to do that quite yet. It may be further down the road, but at this point, this one is working just fine. So, to kind of recap on the electrical system for the 5th Gen 4Runners, and I cannot speak to any other generation, but for the 5th Gen, if you look online at different forums, because you won't find anything, or at least very little on YouTube for it, but in the forums, there's some great content, great input in regards to how these are ran and opinions on what you should or shouldn't do when you're replacing things. And many will just add the larger wires to the OEM wires. They won't replace anything. I'm not one of those individuals. I prefer to keep the wires down to a minimum, to keep it clean, and just upgrade things that way. So that's why we chose to completely eliminate the stock OEM wiring instead of adding to. Now, with that being said, how the wires run on this, if you recall, you've got a ground from the battery to the chassis. You have ground that's going down to the frame that's looped over to the block. So they are terminated at the same point on the block. Then you have your power running from the alternator into the fuse box, out of the fuse box to the positive on the battery. Now, we initially just went with upgrading the power from the alternator into the fuse box. Why? Because I wasn't quite sure in regards to the alternator where things were going to run, and I didn't upgrade anything of what your typical Big 3 would be from the alternator to the battery positive. I left it alone, knowing that the stock fuses, the stock power distribution was going to be just fine, and it was going to be okay for now. But I'm not going to go the alternator route, as I had mentioned, so I decided to go ahead and change out how the power system is working. There isn't a need to upgrade the power into the fuse box. However, if you run power, upgraded power from the alternator to the battery, you have to have it fused. So that's what I ended up changing this time, is to go ahead, do this one step a little bit differently, but once again, as I've done with the others, to do it correctly. So I'll go ahead and show everyone now on what we did and how it looks, so you kind of get a better idea of the why. So the three things that were changed. First, we had the 1/0 gauge running from the alternator over to the fuse box. That's gone. We've now replaced it with 4 gauge OFC wire And then one piece that I did notice after a little bit more examination of it, if you recall the slide that we had to push in the 2 tabs in order to bring up the OEM wire out of the fuse box, that actually protects the elements from getting into the fuse box. So I took it off the OEM wire and then retrofitted it to the new one, so now it's safe and secure and the fuse box is sealed again. Second thing is, I picked up a sheet of steel from Lowe's and then cut it to fit this location. Fortunately, there is a bracket that's already there, and there is a location for a bolt right there to the left that was not even being used. So it's perfect to go ahead and secure it directly to the motor. No issues of anything hitting it there. Very little of the elements will end up coming in compared to some of the other places. And I have a bunch of extra audio gear from my car audio competition days that I had this Stinger weather protection A&L fuse block available. So I've got that mounted in place. So now we have our 1/0 gauge running from the alternator up through the fuse block over to the positive on the battery. Everything is clean, everything is safe and protected, and it looks great. So there you have it. The change that I made, and then the reason why I made that particular change. Hopefully that will end up answering some questions for those that do watch the video and are really kind of curious. If you do have any other questions on this in regards to the 5th gen, or why I did something that I did, please go ahead and post it in the comments, good or bad. I'd love to be able to interact with you, answer those questions, and maybe even learn something myself. If you have a 4Runner and you did something a little bit different, I'd love to be able to hear about it. Be sure to click that like button. It certainly helps us by sharing the content out with others that are looking for it. The whole YouTube algorithm thing is pretty interesting and funny, so it really does help us out. Thanks once again for joining along on the journey. We really do appreciate it. Take care, stay safe. We'll see you next time.